Good morning and welcome to our webinar today with Abe Eshkenazi, CEO of Association for Supply Chain Management. I'm Monique Fennick from Australasian Supply Chain Institute, and we hope that you will enjoy today's webinar. Firstly, some housekeeping. We'd like to know whether you can hear me. If that's the case, please raise your hand. Thank you so much. You're able to talk to us in the chat box privately. There is a poll that will run to start off the webinar, and that's anonymous, but there's also a Q&A section where you can type your questions. That's not anonymous, but we'd like you to ask as many questions to Abe and the panel as possible so that we can get some really great discussions happening after Abe's keynote presentation. There'll be more Q&As via the ASCI closed member LinkedIn member group after the webinar, and the webinar is recorded and will be posted to the ASCI resources library closed down for members after today. One CPD point will be awarded upon request, so in the Q&A box, please just type in CPD anytime throughout today's webinar and we'll know to award you that point. First off, we have our co-host Michael Page joining us for a market update on the jobs market. Claire Stewart is a senior supply chain consultant at Michael Page. She specialises in the FMCG and retail markets. With 12 years of experience across Australia and the UK, Claire has developed specialist knowledge and talent search for roles, including supply chain purchasing and demand planning. And we welcome Claire to the webinar today. Welcome, Claire, and make sure you're unmuted there.
Morning everyone. Thanks, Monique. Yes, I just thought I'd give everybody a bit of an overview as I'm down, I guess, in the trenches, speaking to a number of businesses and supply chain professionals. So I was able to come across some information from IBM last week that stated that Australian businesses with local manufacturing and considered domestic control were those businesses that would bounce back quicker than the multinationals and the bigger blue chips. I guess on the whole, in terms of the FMCG businesses that I've been speaking with, they'd seen massive spikes in demand through their retail channels, which was probably no surprise, but a real levelling off in food service and export. So they'd felt from I guess a personnel perspective that they would shift people across into different areas. The retailers have really been scrambling to uplift their online channels. I know a couple of weeks ago when I spoke to the guys at Myer that they'd seen over 200% increase through that channel, and seemingly API and Kmart quite similar. Catch and Kogan were experiencing unprecedented lifts in demand, and cited to me that some of the surprising categories for them had been some of the electronics, appliances and office supplies, which they probably hadn't previously considered, considering everyone's working from home now, and that bread makers were the most popular item that people across Australia just couldn't get enough of. Ilian Consultant had also cited that total spending was down 14% across the board, which is quite interesting as well. So just a bit of a snippet from the FMCG and retail market for you.
Great, and we've just launched a poll, if you wouldn't mind joining in on that from an anonymous perspective to tell us which industry you're from, and also if you're planning to hire in the near future, and we can share those results with you straight away after you complete those. And a couple more moments and I'll end the poll. And they're the results for you, Claire. So you can see that we have many from the consumer goods here today as the highest. A bit of a mixture of hiring now, hiring in 3 months, no, none of the above and not applicable, but we'll see, we'll watch this space. So now to introduce our co-host from the Australasian Supply Chain Institute, Matthew Jackson, ASCI's Victorian president. Matthew is a leader within the supply chain and operations practice of Deloitte, focusing on manufacturing and Industry 4.0. He has over 18 years as an operations lean practitioner across Australia, North America, and Europe. His particular skills are in the design and implementation of large-scale transformations through coaching and mentoring teams in both service and manufacturing environments. He's adept at engaging both frontline and C-level whilst motivating them to embrace and generate operational improvement. He's certainly good at motivating the Victorian ASCI community. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you, Monique. Hi, everybody. Let me make sure everything's okay on my end. First off, I just want to say welcome everybody to today's webinar. And as the Victorian chapter president for ASCI, I 100% concur with Claire's market update. I've seen a lot of interesting new ways of working in our supply chains, the massive uplift for products and goods for online and also at the stores, but also the food service areas have been affected quite significantly. I think Victoria and our supply chains are extremely busy right now, and I hope that you are all safe and well, either working from home, hopefully, or from the recommended distance, which I've seen some very clever Victorian ASCI members posting, showing their distance for their meetings, which I think is really critical right at this point in time, and that your supply chains are seeking some of the opportunities that COVID-19 presents. Today's topic is a very important one because now is the time to study APICS. Given the lockdown situation and opportunity to prepare for future resilient and sustainable supply chains, how do we do that? By equipping ourselves with global best practice end-to-end supply chain knowledge. Whilst you can choose to self-study APICS certifications, they come with a platform of digital resources as well as textbooks. You can also choose a hybrid solution, which is self-study and or online, and our online certification review evening classes, which commence in July, which are excellent classes to attend. You can scan the QR code with your phones right there at the bottom right to subscribe to the information pack for updates on pricing and scheduling if you're watching the recorded version of this webinar. Or simply just wait to receive the link to the information pack if you have registered for this live webinar. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Abe Eshkenazi, CEO, Association for Supply Chain Management. Abe was scheduled to meet you face-to-face this month at Megatrends, but due to unforeseen circumstances regarding COVID-19, the event was canceled. So he has been so kind as to join us nevertheless from his home in Chicago. In fact, Abe, I think if you did come to Megatrends, you'd probably still be stuck here in Australia from what it sounds like. Abe launched ASCM in 2019. It is built on the foundation of APICS, which Abe has led since 2006. Now, prior to joining APICS, he was the managing director for the operations consulting group of American Express Tax and Business Services. Abe is experienced in project management, business process redesign, individual and organizational alignment, and the design and implementation of outsourced strategies. He is a lifelong learner with not only an MBA in management, but also an MBA in finance, a bachelor's degree, and a number of industry certifications, including the one in focus today, the APICS Certified Supply Chain Professional, CSCP. Welcome, Abe.
Thank you, Matthew. And welcome to everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time today to join us for this event. And as Matthew shared with you, I was scheduled to be there, and I would not have turned my back on having to stay in Australia for the duration of this pandemic. although I'm sure my family would have wondered, have I moved there permanently, which is not such a bad thing. What we're going to talk about today is not only the focus on the individual within the supply chain, but some of the things that have changed within our environment, not only systemic, but some of the shocks that we're seeing to the system right now. And we'll share with you some of the activities that we've taken to position the organization to be responsive today. But more importantly, what does this look like for the long term? I think everybody clearly understands the challenges that we face right now. And I want to say something at the outset first, is that I hope everybody continues and your families to be safe and healthy and in a secure environment. That is not the case for a lot of the supply chain professionals and a lot of healthcare workers. So as we discuss the challenges today for supply chain, we're not going to talk a whole lot about the humanitarian effects, but I think it bears saying over and over again, none of this would be possible without a safe and healthy environment for supply chain workers, as well as any healthcare worker or any office worker. So through the discussion, while we may not specifically reference safety and health of workers, please understand that that is at the foundation of everything that we talk about. There is no activity, whether it be supply chain or otherwise, if individuals cannot maintain and organizations cannot provide safe and healthy work environments for their employees. So let's get started. I don't have to explain a whole lot about the impact of supply chain today. It is curious, though, that not 2 months ago, most supply chain professionals, if they were in a room with individuals that didn't know or understand supply chain, if they were asked what they did, and you would share that you were a supply chain professional, you'd get a lot of quizzical looks, as well as questions about what do you supply and what are the, where's the products that you have. And this, in less than 2 months, has shifted from us having to explain supply chain to everybody in the world to us having to defend supply chain all over the world. Why there are stock outages, why there is excess capacity, why are not we responding on personal protection equipment? Why don't we have testing available? All of this is part of the supply chain process, and it is a topic of conversation in every boardroom. It is a topic of conversation at every kitchen table, as well as between individuals about the impact of supply chain. This is probably one of the most dynamic times that we have experienced in our lifetimes, specifically the change that has occurred. We endeavored to be a relevant organization for consumers and patients alike, as well as supply chain professionals. However, we did not anticipate this to come through a pandemic that upset the entire economic as well as the humanitarian focus for a lot of the economies across the globe. So when we take a look at the changes that have occurred, this is not the first disruption that we've encountered. As you see, there have been a number of disruptions to supply chain. Not the least of which have been geopolitical unrest, as well as environmental issues, as well as child labor, slave labor, conflict materials, corruption. We've seen disruptions in supply chain ever since we've seen supply chains. So it's a question of how do we respond? What necessary tools, what necessary resources can we provide to address these? These are challenges that supply chain professionals face every day. These are truly masters of orchestration, not only for their organization, but truly across the enterprise and responsive to an industry, responsive to consumers, and responsive to patients. And that's where we see the significant challenge for supply chain today. 60 years ago, it was a function that was driven by men and women predominantly sitting in offices with computer screens and spreadsheets and designing and planning production. The majority of the time that they were called upon was when there was a disruption, or that the delivery did not meet expectations or the product did not meet expectations. Rarely were they included in how to prevent and mitigate and respond and recover from supply chain or disruptions. That has changed. The focus of supply chain now is from the shop floor all the way up to the C-suite, all the way to the the hospital room as well as the everybody's home right now. It is having an effect on everybody in terms of understanding the not only the benefit, the impact of supply chain that it has in our economies as well as our communities, but more importantly, the challenges that supply chain that we have faced right now and that has been laid bare through this pandemic. There is a significant need for qualified supply chain professionals. And I want to echo Matthew's comments here about the talent side. There is no better time than right now than to prepare yourself for the challenges that we're currently facing, but more importantly, to prepare yourself for the backside of this disruption and the recovery and the resiliency that organizations must enact so that they can be responsive and that we can continue to rely on organizations and their supply chains to address not only consumers, but patients' needs today and in the future. So when we talk about supply chain today versus in the past, I think we're seeing that the expectation for supply chain professionals has increased dramatically. Being a functional expert was the mark of a trained professional in the past. As long as you are a subject matter expert, that was more than sufficient for you to accomplish and have a career, a rewarding opportunity for your, not only for your organization, but in terms of advancement. What we've seen over the past 5 to 10 years is that functional competency or being a subject matter expert is now the price of entry. That the proliferation of schools as well as baccalaureate programs have enabled the supply chain professional to elevate the role and the responsibility of supply chain professionals beyond the technical expertise that they provided. Now expectations are for collaboration, cross-functional skills, the ability to work across different cultures, across different time zones, that you need to be adaptable, that you need to be responsive to the changes. No better example than the current challenges that we're facing today and the ability to respond and recover from the significant shortages, whether they be on a global basis or on a domestic issue in terms of resource challenges or outages, and that includes people as well as the raw materials. So when we talk about supply chains, we're really talking about different types of supply chains, and let's make sure that we zero in on one of those today, and that is the people side. As most of us know, their supply chains include product, they include information, and more importantly, they include the people. Our focus starts and ends with the supply chain professional and the related activities to meet consumer and patient needs. So if we start with the end in mind, what is the consumer, what does the patient expect out of a hospital system, out of a grocery store, out of a retail outlet, or out of a restaurant? Those are all expectations that are planned for through a supply chain, and this is where competent, capable individuals and the teamwork necessary to execute across the enterprise is really critical here. So when we talk about collaboration, it is across the enterprise, including production, research and design, sales and operations planning, logistics, warehousing, all aspects of supply chain. The supply chain professional is, from our perspective, a good metaphor for this is as an orchestra leader. You are masters of orchestration as supply chain professionals, that coordinating each of the various pieces within the supply chain to ensure that they're on time in the appropriate amount and in the appropriate variety, as well as meeting expectations of the end user. These are all part of the role and responsibility of supply chain professionals, and they have expanded tremendously over the past 3 to 5 years as supply chain has elevated beyond the shop floor and into a strategic imperative that a lot of organizations today view as a critical differentiator for them through their supply chains. So whether we're talking about e-commerce or the ability to shift a retail environment to a home-based environment, these all take trained, qualified professionals. And this is where we focus as an organization, is on the skills and the competency of the individuals necessary to execute on the job. So let's take a look at the skills. What are we looking at? What's the current state as we identify, okay, if people are important, what's the current state and what's future state? Well, as you can see here, this has been a challenge for a number of years to find qualified supply chain professionals. As indicated here, even though we've had a robust increase in the number of schools that provide baccalaureate and master's programs, we still don't have enough supply chain professionals. A couple of data points for you. In the mid-90s, we had approximately a half a dozen to a dozen schools in the world that had a supply chain baccalaureate or a master's program. That was it. Qualified programs. As we sit here today, there are over 500 baccalaureate or master's degree programs in supply chain. The unfortunate part is that a lot of the content that's being developed and delivered at an academic setting where they haven't had a long history of the content doesn't meet employers' expectations. So the concept of ready to work in the supply chain, as indicated here, less than 1 in 6, or barely 1 in 6, are ready to work on the job. The skills gap that's been identified has been exacerbated by the programs. While we applaud academic institutions for developing and delivering supply chain programs, our expectation is that they would teach competency that's consistent with what the employers are looking for, and that's not the case right now. In a couple of studies that have been developed in terms of what employers are looking for versus what employees are providing, there's a significant gap. So there's underweight. Where are individuals underweighted relative to what employers are looking for? The first, they're looking for ability to discern or critical thinking. Can you evaluate a problem? Can you look at a situation and determine what is a root cause? What's a symptom? What are the things that you can move or change to see positive outcomes? And then more importantly, do you have the right information? So critical thinking and the ability to discern or evaluate a situation before taking action was one of the skill gaps that were identified. The second that was identified was real world experience. Too often, what is being taught at the school is not consistent with a real world supply chain today. Oftentimes, it's very dated in terms of technology or artificial intelligence or a lot of the machine learning in the manufacturing environment today. It really is a shock to a lot of individuals, specifically high schoolers or individuals entering colleges, 2- and 4-year institutions. When you talk to them about manufacturing or supply chain, the vision that they have in their head is shop floor work, that this is a blue collar job, that this is not using intellect, that oftentimes it's more on manual labor. Then we take them into a manufacturing environment and we show them the artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, and the various technology that's being used in 3D printing. Their eyes open up. This is where they're seeing opportunities and where they see they can fit. Unfortunately, the perception of supply chain and manufacturing has been somewhat dated. So we need to provide better examples, better information about what the current manufacturing and supply chain environment looks like. Getting back to some of the gaps, the other gap that was identified is a global experience or a global perspective. And this is where we have a little bit of a challenge with employers, and specifically on the real world experience. When employers are looking for qualified individuals, one of the questions that we'll ask employers, share with me what your workforce development program is. How do you develop your supply chain professionals? What's your training programs? What's your professional development? What's your certification standards? Is it included in your HR policies? And so when we take a look at whether an organization has internship programs, do you have a mentoring program? These are all long-term investments that will pay off with the qualified employees that you seek. Oftentimes we see employers complain that they don't have enough employees, but yet they're more than willing to poach another employee for a qualified individual as opposed to developing their own. And so this is a particular challenge for a lot of organizations, that they don't see training and workforce development as part of their primary responsibilities to their employees. Let's talk on the other side of the equation. Where are employees overweighted? That means that the competency that they have is more than what the employers are looking for. And you think that that would not be the problem. But when you combine it with the challenge that we just identified, the lack of critical thinking, you'll see where this poses a real problem. And that is most of the applicants were overweighted in technology and in quantitative methods. So you have an individual that is very adept at technology and using computer systems and algorithms without the ability to discern what the problem is. And so therefore they take the problem and apply a solution that is not consistent with the root cause. And so you have this mismatch of competencies and capabilities that is really dangerous and that challenges a lot of organizations. So that's why you see in point number 2, that only 1 in 6 applicants are ready to work because they're not meeting the employer based on their requirements. So this is an opportunity for us, as well as the Australian, chapters, to start to discuss with the academic professors about the content that they're teaching relative to what employers are looking for. This is a significant challenge. The other challenge that we've seen here is turnover. And I will tell you that it is regionally based. We're seeing more turnover in emerging markets than we do in established markets. So oftentimes in Asia or in some of the developing markets, Africa, we see that employers are more than willing to poach an employee from another organization as opposed to developing their own. So we see turnover as a significant challenge because we get an employer sharing with us, why would I train them? I'm going to lose them. And they're not wrong. They may lose them. But the alternative is if you don't train them, they're going to stay. And so the question that we have for the employer is, which would you rather have, a qualified employee for the short term or an unqualified employee for the long term? I think most of us would clearly see that having a qualified employee, irrespective of duration, is much more beneficial for the organization. This is a microcosm of the challenges that we face within the skills gap. So you need to understand it both at an academic level, you need to understand it at an operational level, and then you need to understand it at a career level. Part of the benefit that we have is that this market is growing faster than our ability to provide employees. So when you say that they can't find people with the skills they need, the latest study that we did indicates by 2025, there will be a shortage of over 2 million supply chain workers. That did not include this disruption. And so we would expect that this would increase significantly over time. What's important to note that individuals graduating out of schools right now, the placement rate is over 90%, and starting salaries are second to only to engineers. We'll get into some of the salary data in a little bit to show you the value not only of a 2- and 4-year degree, but more importantly, the value of a credential to demonstrate competency and proficiency for your employers. As an organization, as I mentioned before, our perspective is first and foremost about people. And that's what really drives us as an organization. Our partners are a key part of our organization by providing the training and the highly qualified instructors that deliver that, that training, as well as guidance. So as Matthew was pointing out before, there's a number of ways that you can access content. Leaning on the professionals and on your local chapter is a wonderful opportunity to not only network, but to find opportunities for information sharing, and not only face-to-face, but virtual, as we're all learning this new environment today. But the key is to provide opportunities for individuals to have a career that makes a difference, not just a job. We believe that we can improve economies, we can improve communities and consumers and patients' lives through supply chain. This is a dramatic shift from where APICS started some 60 years ago, which was focused on the supply chain professional, on codifying content, on developing learning systems, as well as the credential. That really was the standard for our organization. And in the past, we used to measure that by a number of different variables. Well, how many members do you have? How many certifications? How many people attended an event? Those were all quantitative measures of volume, it really didn't measure impact. And I think this is where we've shifted as an organization over the past 3 to 5 years, is that we want to be able to focus on the impact of supply chain has on individuals, on communities, and on economies. We truly believe that we can make a better world through supply chain, and that we have the resources, we have the capabilities. The one element that you need to bring to the table is your desire, your competency, and your enthusiasm to make a difference. But you put those ingredients together, and I think we have a wonderful opportunity to change people's lives. And more importantly, this pandemic has demonstrated the value of supply chain professionals like at no other time. Yes, it's been challenging. Yes, it's been grueling. But at no time have I seen supply chain professionals step up the way that they have today. And more importantly, we'll continue to see them as we hit the road to recovery. Our healthcare professionals will make sure that we are safe and healthy. Our supply chain professionals will make sure that we have economies that can sustain individuals and sustain our ability to live healthy and productive lives. And this is where we want to focus as an organization. It's important to note, as we've shifted to ASCM, and more importantly, a better world through supply chain, and that what that entails specifically is making an impact. We believe we can make an impact through not only talent development, but enterprise certification. So how does this fit? How does ASCM and APICS fit as an organization? And what's the difference between APICS and ASCM? Why did we change? As I indicated before, 60 years ago, a number of supply chain professionals, not even termed supply chain professionals back in the day, more ops managers or industrial design professionals. We started with that professional in mind, developing the competency and the capability so they are recognized and rewarded for the contributions they make to their organization. And that sustained us for 60 plus years. As we started to see the impact of technology, as we started to see the impact of e-commerce, as we started to see organizations take a much bigger role and embrace supply chain as a critical differentiator, strategic differentiator, we see that there's an opportunity for us as an organization to represent not only the supply chain professional that has been at the core of our organization, but more importantly, the organization and the impact that they have in delivering to consumers and patients across the globe. But as important is the end of the supply chain, the consumer and the patient. We want to clearly identify that supply chain does make a difference in people's lives. And the way that we do so is through our solutions, through our global standards and engagement. Our effort through our organization is to develop enterprise supply chain talent that can easily and adeptly respond to not only disruptions in supply chain, but can plan accordingly to meet the demands of a dynamic environment that we all live in. As you'll see, ASCM sits on top of the 60 years of content development in our global standards through our certification, and I'll get into those in a second. But as we see our solutions for organizations to transform their organizations while maintaining a focus on sustainability, and we'll get into that in a little bit here, but we want to ensure that whatever solutions and corrections are made as part of this recovery, that it has a long-term perspective in mind about the economy, about the ecology, and more importantly, about the ethics of supply chain. So we want to ensure that supply chains are responsible, accountable, and sustainable. And to do so, we need to make sure that we are developing the appropriate standards for organizations, and more importantly, that we're disseminating those across the enterprises as well as across communities. We're seeing much more interest and sort of awareness of supply chain and the concept of conscious consumerism. We think this is only going to increase, not decrease. We believe that people will continue to be interested in what's in their products and services and hold companies accountable. Our responsibility is to enable organizations not only to respond to the economic challenges, but also the ethical and the environmental challenges that supply chains face, not only today, but in the future. So a little bit about ASCM. Why did we switch to ASCM? When we started to focus our efforts on enterprises, and that is the company as well as the consumer and the patient, we asked ourselves a question, and that is, can APICS, the organization that developed the certifications and the designations, be recognized for industry as well as the consumer and the patient. And we did a number of studies, and we went out to the market as well as our corporations. And the feedback that we got is that APICS was clearly recognized for the certifications, but it was not as relevant on innovation or on relevant, timely, action-oriented data that individuals are looking for. A great example is what is occurring today within the pandemic. There is a whole host of opportunities for us to disseminate content on resiliency, on recovery, that would not necessarily go into our learning systems. So what we wanted to do was to establish an organization that was focusing on the innovation, on the relevancy, and on timely, accurate information, as well as the world-class certification that APICS has provided. So hence the focus on the industry as well as on the consumer and the outcomes or the end result of our supply chains. So we introduced ASCM as a leader for transformation, innovation, and leadership, supported and founded on the content that APICS has provided for 60 years and that has been established as an industry standard. As you can see on the right side, pick your metric, whether you pick it on members or whether you pick it on revenue or on partners or on certifications. We are the largest association in the world for supply chain. More importantly, we are the only end-to-end supply chain organization in the world. While there are a number of other associations that have a pure play, for example, procurement, whether it be SIPs or ISM, they are within the vertical of sourcing, whereas ASCM focuses on end-to-end supply chain, from design to plan, source, make, deliver, return, warehouse, all aspects of supply chain. What we want to do is focus supply chain the way that organizations view supply chain, not as a series of segmented steps, but as an integrated activity that delivers on their objectives to their patients and to the consumers. So our focus as ASCM is to be innovative, is to be responsive. And this pandemic, this disruption has offered us an opportunity to not only display the competency and the depth of knowledge that we have across our membership, but as well as our partners across the globe. This is truly where the association and supply chain professionals can make a difference, not only in their organization today, but in the future. So when we talk about the solutions that we provide, you take a look at them in a number of different areas. First, I discussed a little bit before about transformation, and that is working with organizations to identify the gaps within their supply chain. Ours is more on the benchmarking side as opposed to the advisory side. Most of the organizations that we work with are the large multinationals who have relationships with top-tier consulting, whether it be Deloitte or any of the other groups. They've established those relationships with them. Our role is to identify the gaps within their supply chain and leave it up to the organization to work with the Deloittes and their consulting partners to fill those gaps or to cure the disruptions that they have or the significant opportunities that exist to improve their supply chains. So transformation from our perspective is on benchmarking, is on identifying the gaps within their supply chain. And that leads to the learning organization or sustaining that. And you do so through the talent. And this is where our focus is none of this is possible without developing the appropriate talent. And so sustainability, whether it be on economic or environmental, needs trained professionals, whether it be a supply chain professional working with a sustainability professional or a climate change officer. The necessary alignment of these roles and responsibilities has taken on significant urgency, not only through this disruption, but more importantly on the recovery side. Our efforts have been to try to provide information for supply chain professionals, not only on the recovery and the resiliency during this time period, but more importantly, what can you expect on the backside of this disruption for the industry? Lastly, our foundation that we reinvigorated or reestablished last year. The focus for us is on not only the humanitarian supply chain, but included is a lot of STEM content for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We're disseminating a lot of free content for kindergartners, middle school, and high schoolers so that they can become familiar with supply chain. I think we're going to have to revise a lot of those because I think a lot of individuals are clearly within the supply chain mindset today. But more importantly, that we want to provide opportunities for individuals that may not be in the supply chain today to see that there are opportunities for employment. And I do want to pause here. While I shared with you that our focus was on the supply chain professional and specifically those in college, graduating and moving into a supply chain career, mid-careers and late stage, subject matter experts, the focus for us has now included entry-level jobs. The significant displacement that has occurred within a variety of industries, whether it be retail or food, has provided a significant challenge for a lot of individuals to get back on the payroll for a lot of employers. So while we're seeing a significant disruption, whether it be in food or retail, we're seeing significant hiring in logistics and warehousing, but yet the individuals don't have foundational competency. So we're taking some of our content and we're disseminating it for free to prepare individuals for a shift in a job. Now, this is not a career opportunity for a lot of these individuals, it's a job opportunity. But given the current circumstances, we believe that it was within our responsibility to assist other organizations that have been devastated by this pandemic, and more importantly, the individuals that have been displaced. That we believe that we can enable a number of these individuals to get back on to the workforce and to have rewarding careers, more importantly, have a job today that was not existent for a lot of these individuals through this disruption. The focus for us in moving forward in terms of the standard, I shared a little bit before about our standards, and at the top of it sits our certifications. The CPIM, which is by far and away our most recognized certification in the marketplace. Over 120,000 individuals have been certified over the past 40 years. It is a clear differentiator for a lot of individuals in the hiring for supply chain professionals. If you look at a lot of the job ads, they'll either indicate a preference or requirement for our certification, specifically CPIM. It is a designation that qualifies you as a subject matter expert in supply chain. This has been not only from a recognition from our organization, but the industry. And I'll get into the salaries as in a second here to show you that organizations are willing to pay for individuals that have that designation because they clearly understand that these individuals improve the operations of the organization. I get this a lot when I go to schools and I share with them the salary survey, and it shows that individuals get a significant boost with a credential. And they ask me, should I get my credential right away? Should I go get it? My advice to them is no, go to the workforce. Get on the job, see what supply chain is all about. I think this is one of the areas that we probably need to spend a little bit more time within the academic setting, is that oftentimes there's a perception that supply chain is a job. And what we have to explain is that supply chain is more like engineering. There is no job called engineer. There are civil engineers, there are architectural engineers, there's different types of engineers. Similarly, there is no job called supply chain. You have your planners, you have your procurement professionals, you have logistics, you have warehousing. These are all functions within supply chain that comprise the field of supply chain management. And I think part of the challenge is that people really don't understand how do you enter the workforce for supply chain, what are the competencies necessary to be a skilled professional, and more importantly, where can you move to within supply chain? So this is a benefit, but also a challenge. In some respects, being a finance guy in my career, it was easy for me to see how I became a CFO. I know the role I needed, I know the experiences, I know the credentials. Not as clear within supply chain as to how you become a VP or a chief supply chain officers. You can come in through procurement, you can come in through logistics, you can come in through design, you can come in through planning. There are a number of different opportunities. So this is a benefit, but it's also a challenge because there's not a career path. There are a number of career paths that are available to you. So when we take a look at the designations that we have with our certifications, as well as DDMRP, which we've embraced and for content, as well as the SCORE Professional. When you take a look at more tertiary opportunities for workforce development, our Principles on Demand is a great opportunity for individuals that have little or no familiarity with supply chain concepts or terminology. This is a wonderful opportunity for them to gain some knowledge and some insight in terms of the role, responsibilities, and more importantly, all the various job functions that are encompassed within the concept of supply chain for an organization. You'll see we have a number of models which include the SCORE digital standards and the digital capabilities network that Deloitte has been working on for a number of years and that we're partnering with you'll see a press release shortly about our relationship with Deloitte and more importantly about the digital capabilities model. Probably as critical today as it's ever been is the transformation to a digital frontier. A lot of organizations were doing a slow walk into the future, specifically on digital. As we enter this pandemic, I think the majority of them have now fast-tracked their investments in a digital model. And a lot of organizations that had not perceived this as a critical investment are now recognizing that in order to be agile and responsive, that you need to have a digital model for your supply chain. So let's talk a little bit about the engagement, some of the areas that our partners as well as our organization provides. This is a little bit of a misnomer because 2 months ago, I would have told you that events were a significant part of who we are and what we do as an organization. I can now tell you that we are challenged, as almost every organization is, in terms of identifying when are we going to get back and be able to congregate or to be with our friends and neighbors without worrying about our safety and our health. So events have taken a little bit of a pause for almost every organization in the world right now until we can clearly identify what are the appropriate measures that need to be in place for safety and health, and how can we assure individuals and the general public that it's safe to go into a school, that it's safe to go into your office or to congregate in a grocery store or in another work setting. This is a critical aspect on getting the supply chain back into what we would consider normalized operations. And I know a lot of us are shaking our head right now in terms of what normalized looks like. It's going to be a while before we know what real demand and what a normalized supply chain looks like for a lot of the industries. And I think it bears mentioning that the impact on different industries has been as unusual as the variety of industries. So whether we're talking about aerospace, automotive, food, or warehousing, every industry is facing a different challenge. And whether it's on safety or whether it's on raw materials or whether it's on domestic production or on surge production, these are unique challenges that are going to take time for the supply chain network to not only absorb, but to respond to. More importantly, some of the opportunities that you have as an individual is to network with your local chapter. And I want to emphasize this again. The Australasian chapter is one of the more dynamic, diverse chapters. And the mentoring, training, and networking opportunities that you get through your local partner is more than any organization can provide, even our organization can provide from Chicago or from a distant location. So I urge you to lean on your local partner, lean on your members. These are individuals that are more than willing to help you not only understand what this supply chain is all about, but more importantly, how you succeed. I am truly blessed to be part of an organization that views mentoring and opportunities for cross-functional development as a hallmark of our industry, almost like no other. This is a a passion industry. Individuals that get into this industry have a real passion for delivering and meeting expectations. So you'll see that we have a variety of different ways that individuals can engage, not only virtually, but face-to-face as well. And obviously everybody's hope is that we can get back to what we would consider a more consistent opportunity for individuals to get together and different opportunities to congregate and to disseminate and share information and experiences. Talked a little bit before about making an impact, and this will give you an idea as to how we view our the connection between our products and services as well as the expectation of the marketplace. So you'll see that talent development really does sit at the core of what we do as an organization. While there are benchmarks and there are research data out there, our certifications are a clear differentiator for individuals within the marketplace. Individual designations, specific to CSCP, CPIM, and CLTD, are industry recognition, are industry recognized as standards for individuals that execute on those supply chain roles. And they are not only sought after, but they're highly compensated for their efforts. It's important to note, as I talked before about working with schools and having some of the students reach out and say, yeah, I'm going to get my certification right now, and then I'm going to get the, the higher pay. I do have to explain to them that the way that it works is that you get a job, you perform, the organization succeeds, then you get the increase. It's not you get a job, you get a credential, and then you get the increase. And a little bit of altruism goes a long way here for the employees and the individuals to understand that individual performance is fantastic, but it's the organization that we're looking at in terms of driving transformation. This has been a change for us as an organization where APICS fits not only through local chapters and membership and enabling the individual. ASCM is focused on the enterprise, and that's the company as well as the consumer and the patient and the impact that it does. And it's important to note, certifying an individual in and of itself is not the end of the game. And for 60 years, we thought that that was our responsibility. As long as we certified that individual and knew that they were competent, we had done our job. What we realized is that was only the beginning of the journey. That the rest of the impact and the rest of the journey was really what made the difference for that individual, was on the job, enabling an organization to be more efficient, effective, and sustainable, and meeting your consumer or your patient needs. That's the end of our journey. The credentials and the certifications are the beginning. This is the recognition of these individuals that represent supply chain in the industry. And you'll see that local networking and membership or recognition of your capabilities is an important part of your demonstrating your competency, but more importantly, representing the supply chain industry and what it provides for individuals. So we talked a little bit before, and I know that Matthew shared this with you, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but you can take a look at the various focus areas for CPIM, CSCP, and CLTD. If a layperson were to ask me what's the difference between CPIM and CSCP, I'll leave the logistics, transportation, and distribution aside for a second. What's the difference between CPIM and CSCP? CPIM is a content that is intended to make you a functional expert. That the areas that we're identifying here between forecasting, scheduling, and capacity planning, they're intended to provide you the relevant competency and capabilities to execute on those job responsibilities. So if you think about it as a continuum, it's about a mile wide and about 10 miles deep. We take you in depth to the concepts and the operations of an organization. As we move to CSCP and we take a look at the overarching role of supply chain, not only within the organization, but outside the organization, your vendors, not only tier one, but your vendor's vendor, all the way to the raw materials. And then on the other end, taking a look at your customer and your customer's customer, all the way to recycling, reusing, waste, and the circular economy that we'd all like to achieve. CSCP, you can view it as about a mile deep, but 10 miles wide. That what we intend to provide through CSCP is insight into all aspects of supply chain so you can manage the various roles and responsibilities and have visibility across the enterprise as well as your vendors and your customers. So CSCP is meant more for individuals that are leads or functional expert, or that collaboration experts across the enterprise that have multiple functions reporting to them. So depending on your focus, if you're entering the workforce and you're looking to establish your competency and your capabilities, I would suggest CPIM. If you've been in the workforce and have developed competency and responsibility for multiple activities across the enterprise, I would then consider CSCP. As we move to CLTD, it becomes more of a pure play opportunity, and this content area comes from our merger with the American Society for Transportation and Logistics. We introduced the CLTD designation back in 2017, 2018, and the focus was on logistics, transportation, and distribution. I don't think any of us really had an insight in terms of how important this was going to be until this disruption hit. And as I indicated before, they cannot find enough employees in these fields to either man the warehouses or to manage the warehouses. And so this is a significant opportunity for individuals that are looking either to enter the workforce or to see a job or career opportunity within logistics, warehousing, and distribution. The certifications are industry standards. Organizations clearly recognize those. More on the functional leads as opposed to HR. Oftentimes, the human resources work with the functional leads to identify what are the competencies and capabilities necessary for an individual to be successful on the job. The more that we work with our HR professionals, the better qualified candidate that you're going to find. So I urge you, as a supply chain professional, as you're looking for talent, sit down with your HR professional, work in tandem with them to identify what are those characteristics that you're looking for. Oftentimes we see organizations embed our certifications within their criteria for individuals to not only get a job, but to get a promotion. There are a number of organizations that have embedded it. This is an opportunity for you to evaluate which certification is right for you. You need to ask yourself, where are you focused? What's your focus not only today, but what's your focus 5 years from now? And more importantly, what do you aspire to be in your supply chain career? I do want to focus on this a little bit because I would not have focused on this prior to the pandemic, and that is our principles on demand. This was written a number of years ago, but it was called Fundamentals. Every content area was updated and revised to truly focus on the fundamentals of operations and supply chain management. As you'll see here, there are a number of educational courses that you can either take on demand or through a blended learning. You can get it on any device, anytime, anywhere. And what we want to do is make it easy for individuals. More importantly, there's a lot of self-study tools, as well as a lot of quizzes that are included in there. It's a very dynamic content base. This is intended for individuals that have little or no experience with supply chain or don't have a baccalaureate degree. Oftentimes, this is an opportunity for them to understand what are the roles, responsibilities, and activities that are encompassed within supply chain. And that includes every area of supply chain, from manufacturing to sales and operations planning to distribution and logistics. Obviously, the intent is not to make the individual an expert in any one of those areas. It's more to give them visibility about the opportunities that exist within supply chain, and more importantly, to see where their desire is and to be able to get a job. So we've embedded this content with a number of other organizations. We're working with the National Retail Federation to embed our content within a number of their designations or micro credentials that we see as an opportunity for individuals to separate themselves in the marketplace. But more importantly, we view workforce development as a continuum, not only from the awareness of supply chain jobs, but more importantly to careers and to leadership opportunities. Our focus is we would like to see supply chain professionals not only recognized, but rewarded for the contributions they make to their organizations. So let's talk a little bit about the rewards for supply chain professionals. As you see here, individuals that have a designation, their median salary is 25% higher than those without a certification. More importantly, what we see is that individuals within the supply chain marketplace are highly compensated for their contributions. We have among the, by the way, this report is available for anybody. It is free online. If you log into our website, you can download the full report. And in it, you'll see that we do separate individuals by degrees, those that do have degrees and those without degrees. Individuals that have a high school diploma and 5 years experience, their median salary is somewhere between $65,000 and $75,000. This is without a credential. So you can rapidly see what individuals with four-year degrees as well as a credential separating themselves in the marketplace. These are highly compensated jobs because they make a difference in the companies that the individuals work for. And these organizations are not benevolent, trust me. They're paying because they get value. And the contributions that supply chain professionals make to their organizations are recognized and highly valued by organizations. As Matthew pointed out in the beginning of this, I can think of no better time than to upgrade your skills and your competency today for what we believe is going to be a significant demand for supply chain professionals, not only today, but on the backside of this. And I think we all hope that the backside of this is much sooner than later, so we can start planning for the future and demonstrating the value of supply chain, not only to economies, but to consumers and patients alike. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abe, so much for those fantastic insights. I think a lot of the information that you were able to share there really hit home for myself. I think a better world through supply chain is such an important factor, especially nowadays with what's taking place, not just locally, but globally. And another part you talked a little bit there, which I always have found in my whole career is there's book smarts and there's street smarts. And I really like how we have different levels for individuals in that area throughout their whole career. I think one of the things is, everybody, I think we're coming close to the end, so I'm going to try to wrap things up. However, we do have Andrew Hill, who is the former head of supply planning within the Oceania region at Brightstar Corp, and has recently completed his CSCP as a graduate. We're going to have Andrew join our closed LinkedIn group that he'll be able to answer a lot of questions that I'm sure a lot of our attendees have in regards to some of the benefits and what his experience has been since and the process of getting his CSCP. So with that, I would like to call this to an end. Thank you so much, Abe, for finding the time and presenting all the fantastic things and also giving your great insights. And thank you so much, Claire, also for that market update. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you.